Okay guys, this is a starter off my 2009 Harley Super Glide. This is what your starter is going to look like off any Harley that has the 1584cc engine. Mine was starting to get some grinding, like the gears weren't meshing on the startup, so it's about $150 for a new starter aftermarket. So knowing Harley, they probably want about $600 for it. Everything's overpriced. You can replace just what they call your starter drive. That's going to consist of everything in this section here, and that's your throwout gear. So we have our stator assembly over here, and then this is our drive assembly. So how you're going to take this apart and rebuild it's fairly simple. So again, we have the starter off the bike. Obviously, you have a cable here. You don't have to take this off. You can let that on. That's going to be 12 millimeter, but what we don't want to do is have this housing here come apart. If you do need to take it off to check out your stator, you can do that. I highly suggest you don't. I'm going to splice in another section of video that shows you what this all looks like in here and how to fix it if this all springs apart on you. So to get to the disassembly, you're going to start off with you have these have Phillips head inserts in them. These are actually nuts though. They're 9 millimeter screws with a Phillips head recess. So we're just going to pop those out. Once you have those out, you're going to have two rubber caps on the back side of here. You should be able to just unscrew those. And then you're going to have these two 8 millimeter long screws to take out. This is going to separate the drive housing from the stator housing. Be very careful when you do this. Looking at it from the side here, right here's where the assembly is separated. You want to hold this back half together. You do not want this to come apart. If this comes apart, you have brushes back in here that are spring loaded up against the coil, and if this all pops apart, you have to take off the back cap and use a flathead screwdriver to work the assembly back in between those four brushes. Again, I'm going to splice in another section of video where I did that once and had to put it all back together. So hold this together once we get these screws out. It's not going to spring apart right away, but once we get these screws out, hold this together as you pull off the drive housing. And then maybe wrap a zip strip or something around this section to keep it from pulling apart. So again, this is 8 millimeter for these long screws. And everything on this is rubberized undercoating, it looks like. Now right here I got the screws out, and see how this wants to pull apart right here? You see that? You don't want to do that. Hold this together as you pop just the front section out, and as you just saw roll across the floor, there's a ball bearing in here. It's going to fall out. So you have one ball bearing, and that goes on the end of the spring, but you don't put it on the end of the spring. What you do is inside the drive assembly, way down in there, the ball bearing just gets put down in there, and when this goes back together, that spring goes right in there. That's how this comes apart. So again, hold this section here together when you pop off the drive housing. You don't want this to come apart, or you're going to create yourself a lot more work. So now once we have these two sections separated, you also have this idler gear, and you see those 5 metal cylinders in there? This can come off, it doesn't matter, but just be careful you don't lose these, because these are going to drop out too, those 5 metal cylinders. So we're going to flip this upside down. So there we have all those out. Keep a hold of my ball bearing and my 5 cylinders. Now to get the starter drive out, all you're going to do is give the end of this a whack or two with a mallet. There's a little rubber O-ring in there, and that's going to pop that apart. And there's your starter drive. This is what you're replacing. It's got a couple bearings on it. It's got your drive gear, your starter gear, I don't know if these are technical terms, that's what I'm calling them. But this is what you're replacing. You can get this on eBay for about $20. So again, heck of a lot cheaper than a whole new starter. So then the reassembly is just going to be the reverse. You're going to put this back down in there. You may have to give it a small whack with a mallet. Put your idler gear back on. And I'm just doing this for the video. I'm going to take this all apart. I'm going to clean it up. Make sure I don't have any dirt and everything else all over these pieces now that they've been on my workbench. But just to show you the reassembly real quick. Again, ball bearing is just going to get dropped right down in the center there. Put my idler gear on. Put all my cylinders back, my metal cylinders back in there. And then again, I'm just going to put the spring right down in there. This gear here is going to mesh up. It goes right in this small groove right here next to the idler gear. And again, be very careful this doesn't spring apart on you. I'm going to show you how to fix that if it does, but it's better if it doesn't. And we just kind of work it all together. And then there, the assembly's back together. We're going to put our two long screws back in. We're going to put our two 9mm screws back in here, and that's it. Put it back on the bike. And if you disconnected your cable, make sure you reattach that. And that's all there is to it. So hopefully that'll help you out, get you back on the road. Again, I'll splice in that other section for you on the video, and that's from another disassembly, so you'll notice the two videos aren't from the same time period. But that's it. Thanks for watching. Okay guys, I'm going to actually show you this two ways. This is the first time I ever did this myself, so when I took this apart, you remember when we took out these two long screws, the whole assembly sprung apart. That's because you have these magnets in the bottom that are spring loaded, and they go up against the stator assembly here. Now when you're pushing this through, picture that back cap on, when you're pushing this through, you see how you can't get them through there unless you spread those magnets out, but when you're working on this end, you can't get in there to do that. So you have to take off these two back screws, and I told you what a pain in the nuts those were. I ended up having to weld, still a little hot, I ended up having to weld nuts onto the ends of the heads to back them out because they're painted, so you can't get a screwdriver in there properly. And you know, even when I scraped all the paint around the screw, they wouldn't come out. So I ended up just having to tack weld, you know, bolts onto the ends to back them out. So I'll just get two new screws. Luckily, this is all made out of steel and not aluminum. I feared that when I knew I was going to have to tack weld. And it's not a big deal. I'll clean this up and you don't even see it when it's on the bike, so I don't even care about, you know, the marks and things. But so once you get this back cap off, it's easy to fix what you did. Now we can sit there, take a flathead screwdriver or whatever, and we can spread these out one by one as we work our assembly up through. So I'll do that here real quick for you and show you where we're at. Still not extremely easy, but I was able to one by one work those magnets around the stator assembly. So now I can put the end cap back on. You see our two screw holes. I could put this back on, lining up the screw holes. Just like that. No harm, no foul. But again, that's how you fix it if you do it the way I did it. It's easier, like I said in the very beginning, before you take all this apart, it's easier to just put a zip strip or something around this to keep it from springing apart. I mean, you take a look at this and you'll see what I mean. You got to remove these two screws, these two long screws, to get the drive assembly housing off. But be careful this doesn't all spring apart. It just causes a lot more work. So it's one thing I love about YouTube videos. People that don't pretend they're any smarter than they are. It's the first time I did it. I'm letting you know what not to do. So there you go. Hope that helped out.